But you worry about the impact on the U.S. economy by closing the border?
Sure, it's going to have a negative impact on the economy. It's one of the biggest trade deals in the world that we've just done with the USMCA. It's a very big trading partner. But to me, trading is very important. The borders are very important. But security is what is most important to me. I have to have security.
Those comments likely caught the attention of some Republicans on Capitol Hill who are worried about the economic impact of the president's threat to close down the southern border. Here's what Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell had to say earlier today about a possible border shutdown.
Well, we certainly have a crisis at the border. I think the president's right about that. Closing down the border would have potentially catastrophic economic impact on our country, and I would hope we would not be doing that sort of thing.
Okay, meanwhile, many Republicans are likely relieved by the president's announcement that he would delay a push to replace Obamacare until after the 2020 election. The president's shift came after a conversation with McConnell on Monday. The majority leader said he told the president the Senate would not be taking up comprehensive health care reform before the election. Back with us tonight, Juana Summers, national political reporter for the Associated Press, and Jeremy Peters, political reporter for the New York Times. Welcome to both of you. Thank you for being here. Juana, let's start with you. The closing of the southern border. There are all sorts of people who have said, well, he wouldn't do that. That's President Trump redirecting people and misdirecting attention from things. I remind people he did shut down the government when he didn't get a deal he wanted, and it didn't end up getting him a better deal. At this point, there seem to be a lot of conservative interests, a lot of business interests, a lot of Republican interests who are whispering in his ear, this is really not one to joke about.
You're absolutely right. The evidence has certainly been made not just by outside experts, but by members of the president's own party, Majority Leader Mitch McConnell being one of them. But one of the things that I've noticed in following the president on this particular issue is it is one that animates his base. It is literally what he was running on from day one when he launched his presidential campaign. Mm-hmm. And it's something that he has carried on. Now, he seemed to have left some wiggle room as to whether or not he would actually do that in his remarks today. You know, he suggested that he was happy with some of the actions that Mexico has taken, and some of his aides are now looking at partial closures that might ameliorate some of the potential economic impacts of completely shutting down that border. But the question that I have is whether or not he continues to talk about it and use it as a rallying cry, and what politically kind of position that could put Republicans in, right, who are listening to Democrats at home in their district, particularly in the House, who are campaigning on this issue of immigration. And quite a few of them see that as an area where they want to compete with the president. They want to compete with Republicans and show a contrast between how the president views immigration and the situation at the border and how they would handle it.
So for the first 2 years of this presidency, Jeremy, there was some sense that what the president goes out and speaks to his animated base at rallies about would be different than what policy would be. And this, as Juana says, does seem to be one of those instances where the president does not have alignment of thought with Republicans or other conservatives or the business community or most Americans on actually shutting down the southern border. Maybe we just don't have enough of an understanding of the consequences of that. I assume the president does, and that his advisors have told him that that would be economically disastrous.
A couple of things there. I think Trump is always going to do what Trump wants to do. You're not going to push him into a corner, as all of his advisors who know him well enough by now and know not to try to control him will say he ultimately will make up his own mind, and he resists any efforts to try to push him in a particular direction he doesn't want to go in. He's always been that way. I think, though, Ali, there is a difference between Republican voters and Trump voters. Those are not always the same thing. There's overlap, of course, but Trump voters, by and large, will back this president as a matter of tribalism. They see him as their defender. They take on his battles and his scars as their own. And in a situation like this, I think they're probably not thinking of what the ramifications of a border shutdown would be in specific detail. They're looking at it in the abstract, and they think, hey, you know what? He's being tough. He's honoring his promise. He's keeping his promise. I mean, there's a reason Trump travels the country with signs behind him at rallies that say promises made, promises kept, because that's all he has to his base.
And one of those promises made, Juana, was the repeal of Obamacare. He talked about how he would have a replacement the same day, maybe the same hour, if you recall him saying that. Some of those people who take on Donald Trump's battles as their own. Rahima Ellis was in West Virginia today, a state that probably stands to lose the most if Obamacare is repealed, where even Trump voters said, we can't have a repeal of Medicaid and a repeal of Obamacare, which doesn't allow people to be insured if they have pre-existing conditions. There is no Republican effort underway whatsoever to draft some replacement to Obamacare. The president seemed to come out with this week and throw everyone off guard.
Absolutely. And he's since backed off of that in a signal that that's not something he'll take up until after the 2020 election, where if he wins, he would be in his second term. The thing that I found really interesting about this, and that the president stepped out and started talking about health care again, is one, back in 2017, when his party controlled both the House and the Senate, they tried to do this, and they were not successful.
Yes.
And two, they're taking on this issue at a moment where there are actually divisions among the Democrats who are running for president on how to best address health care, whether that's a single payer system or what have you. And you've seen Republicans, other Republicans, not Trump Republicans necessarily, come out and lambast those people, say that they are socialists, that they want to push a single payer government run system and do away entirely with private insurers that people like. And that to me seems like a strategy that Republicans could use in the general election, if depending on who the Democrat is that gets elected, rather than kind of going at this right now.
Right.
And it's not clear that they would necessarily be successful.
That's an interesting point, Jeremy. Wait until the Democrats have nominated a candidate so that person's got a position on what the new health care plan for Democrats will look like after 2020. At the moment, the president is now promising something in his second term that he wasn't able to do in his first term, as Juana points out, when he controlled both houses of Congress.
Exactly. And frankly, Ali, it's something that no president has been able to do. No entitlement program, benefits to voters, to American citizens, has ever been taken away once it's been given out by Congress. It just has not happened. So I think that's kind of a fantasy that Republicans continue to have. There's a reason they haven't been able to do this since Obamacare was passed in 2010. So I think when you're looking at this in terms of 2020, it raises all sorts of interesting questions about what Republicans are going to run on. Because right now, what they have is a message about how awful and radical and leftist the Democrats are. That's what they're going to say. That's what the president is already saying. And he's done a very effective job in talking to Democrats. This is what they've told me. Very effective job of branding aspects of their agenda, like the New Deal, in very negative terms. This is what he does. He reduces serious people and serious ideas to punchlines and childish nicknames. And right now, Democrats are very worried that the way he's attacking things like the Green New Deal, their efforts to broaden health care coverage, the way they're doing that is the way the Republicans and Trump together are doing it is going to be damaging to whoever the nominee is. And from here on out, their job, as they see it, the Republicans are going to try to tie whoever the nominee is to this idea that the Democratic Party is so far left and so radical that it's essentially a socialist party.
Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.